It didn't take Tennessee State long. After leaving the Southern Heritage Classic, they've already found a new dancing partner in Alabama A&M. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll earn $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Now, I want to wrap up today's episode with a look at Coco Gauff and Patrick Mahomes, two of the bigger stars in their sport, and how they have been trying to support HBCUs. In segment 2, it was National Signing Day on Wednesday. Before we start breaking down individual classes next week, I want to talk about how I would approach signing day if I were a coach, and this is primarily focusing on valuing our high school athletes. This whole thing kicks off with a favorite of ours. This week, we've talked about Tennessee State quite a bit in the league. We talk about their absence or their exit from the Southern Heritage Classic. Then we talked about how the Southern Heritage Classic would try to stay alive. We spoke about Tennessee State head coach Eddie George not feeling like his interview with the Chicago Bears was a sham, denying it, discussing about the time that they gave him. We've been very familiar with the Tennessee State Tigers this week, and it's only right that we end the week with Tennessee State because it didn't take them long after leaving the Southern Heritage Classic. They already have a new dancing partner. They're going to have a legacy series with Alabama A&M. And this makes me feel like we were already planning this. We were already planning our next move. It was just a matter of, were we going to stay in the Southern Heritage Classic? Once we decided that answer was no, we already knew where we were going afterwards. It's kind of like when you're in a relationship, and I'm not saying you sending DMs, you sending out feelers or anything like that. It's more so, okay, I see her. I see him. Right? So now once you leave your girl or you leave your boyfriend, now you know exactly where you're headed next. You know exactly who you're going to pursue next. And then you actually get it done. And that's what Tennessee State did. They closed the deal. Not only did they know who they would like to dance with after leaving their partner, they started dancing with them. And that's Alabama A&M in this legacy series. I really do like how they're presenting it. I really do like how they've set it up. I like all of the things that come with this decision, in my opinion, especially the part where I know it's going to be a smart financial decision. Tennessee State is partnering with Alabama A&M, which means that Dr. Paul Bryant will be a part of this as well. If you've listened to when I talk about Alabama A&M, then you're probably aware of the respect that I have for Paul Bryant's business savvy. I think that he's really good at this. I think that his move to step away from tradition while staying in the Magic City Classic was such a move that it's like when you hire a great coach and you get the right to make mistakes after that. We still gonna praise you. He hasn't made the mistakes, but that's the section that he's in. He's in that period where no matter what he's doing, I'm probably gonna be praising it and trusting it. That's how I feel, because he's shown me, hey, we're willing to make these risks, and we're always going to put the financial security of the institution together, or put the financial security of the institution first. I know that technically him being business savvy doesn't help Tennessee State, but I would assume that they stepped to the table with a mutually beneficial deal, because from what I hear, this was supposed to be the Southern Heritage Classic. They tried to get Alabama A&M in that classic. They said no. So If Alabama A&M said no to that, but they said yes to this, I can only assume that the payout is a good amount. Now, will they step away in the same or step away from flat rates in the same way they did with the Magic City Classic? I don't know. But I'm going to assume that the flat rate amount is good for both universities. One, because Paul Bryant has shown me to be business savvy. And then secondly, if you're Tennessee State, it doesn't quite make sense to step away from a bad financial opportunity to get into another bad financial opportunity. Mind you, Tennessee State interim president Dwayne Tucker said, this doesn't make sense for a school that is going through their own financial struggles. So I have to know that finance is on the front of your mind. When you step away to this, it's not as if finance is going to go away. So this is still a big part. They are obviously paying well. How will this work? You'll have 4 years, and who knows, maybe afterwards you go and you upgrade for another 4 years, and it's like, or another 2, you just want, who knows? It'll probably continue to go in even increments because it's going to be a home and home. So you're going Nashville, Huntsville, Nashville, Huntsville. So 25 starts this thing off. It's this year. This is what I mean when I say you move fast. You knew exactly which direction that you wanted to go to. You had already identified the girl Instagram. You had already seen all the pictures. You knew exactly what you wanted to do. You just had to make sure that everything was finished. You needed a little bit of finality in your current situation. Once you got that, it wasn't no grieving. It wasn't no woe is me. We know exactly where we're going. Alabama A&M. Yeah, let's sign the paperwork because this was already being discussed. This didn't start when Tennessee State said I'm stepping out of the Southern Heritage Classic. So deals don't happen that fast. But I like it a lot. I've told you why. But now I want to say what I like in the promotion because they're hitting the 2 buttons I think you need to hit, and that is a return to history and then also making it seem like a big time matchup. Because you're talking about how this used to be a John Merritt Classic matchup. Alabama A&M actually has the lead in that 4-2-3, despite the fact that Tennessee State has a big lead in the all-time series. But in the John Merritt Classic specifically, that goes to the Bulldogs. But I like bringing back history because here's the thing. Everybody is not a historian. And I do notice that a lot with HBCU discourse is the old heads versus the youngins. Because the old heads be like, man, know your history. And the young is like, man, some of that history is so far back that you have to go back and study it. And I don't think that the responsibility should be on there to study that all the time. Tennessee State and Alabama A&M have not played in 15 years. The last time they played was in 2010. That's countless classes that have not seen these two teams face off. That's about a decade plus worth of alumni who have never seen these two teams play. So they might not understand how serious it was back in the day. So what does Tennessee State do as they announce it? They break down the attendance of these matchups to show, hey, we bring out crowds. This is a big game. So in 2005, they had the 5th largest home attendance in their school history with 25,342. Then you had another one over the years, 25,117, 23,871, 23,440, 22,607. So you're highlighting the fact that this matchup is not just, oh, 2 HBCUs playing. This is a matchup that has historically brought people out. I don't know what the numbers are for a bunch of other schools, but when you place these numbers in front of somebody, it tells me that this game should carry some sort of importance to you. Now, maybe you're a 33-year-old alum. You ain't never seen this game, but you want to pop out because, hey, this is a big game for Tennessee State. See, here's the thing. I think that most of my base and a lot of HBCU base, if you're not in the media world, but like if you just support the fans, maybe not on social media, but just in general, when I used to go to TSU games, the alumni that I saw were typically significantly older than me. When I go back today and I watch games when I'm covering. So I think the last one I went to was 2023 Prairie View. No. It's 2023 FAMU. That game was heavy alumni and they were older. I think my base is a lot of 40 to 50 up age people. Those typically have seen this. They've seen all of the history. They're well versed in that kind of stuff. I think that when you start talking about how big of a game it is, now you allow the 33-year-olds, you let the 28-year-olds, the ones my age, right? Like you let them be able to come in and experience this for themselves and get them excited for it. You have to be excited, right? Like at the end of the day, if I'm out of school, most people, you have to get excited to go to this game. Most people aren't just going to games just because. That's the way that I see it in my personal opinion. But kudos to them. Great move. Great move. I think that they're hyping this thing up, showing you it's important, showing you that people pop out. Hopefully, we get some of the younger alumni. I'll be looking at the attendance numbers if I can remember to see if they're in the 23,000 range, high 22K range. We'll be watching for that. But in general, I think this was a really good move. But I want to push forward and I want to talk about my approach to National Signing Day. Things are a little bit different. There are going to be larger classes announced. But before we even get into that, I want to talk about how I would spread out my recruiting between transfer portal players and then also high school recruits as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The big game is almost here. It's only 2 days away on Sunday, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and $1 billion in winnings, PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. And it's simple because all you have to do is pick at least 2 player projections, pick more or less, and if you get them both correct, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game. Patrick Mahomes just has to throw for 1 yard. I think he'll do that. So you go ahead and pick that and you get one other guy right and you're cashing out. For example, this week, I'm going to take the more on Travis Kelce yards, but I'm going to take the less on Jalen Hurts passing yards. So download the app today and use the code Locked On College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. As we continue rolling today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Today with all of the biggest stories around the world. Get ready for the Super Bowl and a quick recap on the NBA trade deadline. We have some crazy ones this year, so make sure you listen to my guy break them down. I want to continue talking a little bit of football, though. We're not ready to get into basketball just yet on here. My approach to National Signing Day would probably be a tad bit different than other people's. I'll be honest with you. I'm prioritizing high school athletes. And the reason I say I think it's different is because it feels as if Trey Oliver is one of the few people who does that at North Carolina Central. That is one of the reasons I don't think that many people would see the value in it. But to me, you build build a foundation through high school talent. And yeah, I'm gonna say it. I think that high school talent is more valuable than transfer portal talent, depending on your situation. And I would say most people are in a situation where high school talent is more valuable than transfer portal talent. Too often, I think we fall in love with grabbing the guy from the Big 12, grabbing the guy from the Big 10. Oh, we want to get this big school prospect. And maybe I'm pessimistic. But that does not move me. A lot of recruiting isn't my thing, but in general, the transfer portal player does not move me in the way that I see it move other people. That does not mean that I won't get excited about it. If there's something to get excited about, that doesn't mean I won't view the upside of it. But recruiting is one of the times when you just have to be optimistic because you don't know when anything is going to work out. You just have to hope you get it right. But when it comes to transfer portal players, I think too often we see the school and say, ooh, I like that. And I don't get that feeling. I don't. We say, oh, they're from a bigger school. Should work out. For me, it's difficult when you spent 2-3 years in college. But anyway, that's not what we're doing today. I believe in grabbing a majority of high school players. Let's say I had 20 prospects or I had 20 recruits. I'm probably having a baseline of 10 and going as high as 14. So you're looking at least half and about 3/4 almost 3/4. So what, 2/3 essentially of my lineup would be coming from the high school ranks, because I believe you have to form a foundation. Many people are not in a place where they can go get a couple of transfer portal players who are going to be here for a couple of years and win championships. I do not believe that. I do not believe that. To me, I want to go get the young guys who I can keep around for hopefully 4 years. The dynamic of college athletics is changing. I was on the couch watching ESPN, and they were mentioning Elijah Hawkins. I remember when Hawkins used to be a Bison, right? Like the world of college football, college athletics, period, is changing because there is the transfer portal, and with the transfer portal comes a whole lot of more stuff, a whole lot of more appeal. We just seen Andrew Jones. He's leaving, going to the SEC. We see Caden High. He's leaving, going to the FBS level, I think, to the Big Ten. Like, you see these things, and it's not uncommon. It's not as if, oh, well, we know it's possible. No, we know it's likely. That's the crazy part about the transfer portal and being a small school, is you always knew your players leaving was a chance. Oh, that's possible. But there's a big difference between knowing something's possible and believing it to be likely. Whenever I see a player go off and he has 1, maybe even 2 years of eligibility, my complete expectation is that he is going to go for greener pastures. My complete expectation is that that will be an FBS player, if not this year, the following season. It's very difficult to keep people around. I don't expect them to. But still, I'd rather go with the person who has a longer possible tenure. Because if you get a high school player and they go crazy their sophomore year, they may leave and they end up being a 2-year player for you. But if you get somebody who only has 2 years of eligibility, you know that's a 2-year player for you. And the reason I go grab high school guys is because even if you have the transfer portal players who are playing, or you have more veteran players that you recruited out of high school, that's all fine and dandy. But when those guys leave, you have to have somebody underneath them, and preferably somebody who has actually been getting reps, somebody who has been around for a little bit. Think about the fact that North Carolina Central went from Mookie Collier to Jamari Taylor. And they had that opportunity because they pulled in, and I know technically Taylor was a transfer portal player, but he was a lot younger. But the point stands, because most times you're getting a transfer portal player who has 2 to 3 years eligibility. You rarely getting a guy with 4. But the point is, you had young guys behind Collier so that you could just step in and hand off the reins. You need that as a team. I'll give you the select few people who I would really co-sign going heavy transfer portal. And when I say heavy, I mean maybe 11, like maybe even having more transfer portal players than high school ranks. Give me Delaware State, Norfolk State, Jackson State, Tennessee State, and maybe South Carolina State. When you come to Norfolk and Delaware, you're talking about 2 teams who I believe they're expecting quick turnarounds. When you go get the celebrity coach, you go get the guy with a lot of, or with not a lot of experience, you would think the expectation would be, okay, give them a year. But those guys seem to think they're going to come in and kill it right away. So if that's going to be the case, you need to grab transfer portal players, because you want more veteran guys who can perform immediately up to par. That's the idea of getting a transfer portal player. If you go get somebody out the portal, you're expecting them to come in and be a quick contributor, especially if they have 2 years of eligibility. Nobody's coming in with 2 years. The first year, they got to figure it out. And the second year, they maybe get the chance to be an impact player. No. For Jackson State, you're already there. I just won the championship. I just need to address a couple of pieces here and there. I don't want to taper off. Tennessee State, I just reached a peak. I'm losing Boogie Trotter. I don't want to replace him with a freshman. I want to replace him with somebody with a little bit more experience. And that's just for off the top of my head. They may have a Boogie Trotter replacement who's been on the roster for 2.5 years. I don't know right now. But what I'm saying is the principle of, I know we just have to plug a hole here, plug a hole there. That's when I start going to the transfer portal. I like the portal for patching holes, getting me over the top, quarterback, and offensive line. Right? I think that the first 2 are pretty self-explanatory. I've built my foundation, and now I need to sustain or just get that last push. I'm just a couple of players away, and I know I could be a championship quality team. I don't know too many people who fit that mold. I really don't. I left North Carolina Central out because that's just not the MO. South Carolina State is a maybe because I've seen I've seen their recruiting class, and they went half and half. But South Carolina State is a maybe because they're just difficult to project. I can't get a grasp on where Chennis Berry will be. And I think the MEAC is extremely volatile. So you could bring back high school players or you could go get transfer portal guys. And I don't know how to feel either way. But I don't think anybody in the SWAC is right there. Maybe Alabama State feels like they are. I know they just got a quarterback out of the transfer portal. So, but that's why I would say for those guys, yeah, go hit the portal heavily. But at quarterback, I think we've seen the success of transfer portal quarterbacks. We've seen the Jeremy Musas, right? Like we've seen those guys come in. Jackson State with Jacoby and Morgan. We've seen these players come in from the transfer portal and have success. And when I say that, I mean specifically FBS coming down to the FCS level. So the clear value is there. I would argue that if I'm a team trying to build my foundation, I may try to go get some transfer portal offensive linemen. They're veterans who have been around for a little bit longer. They've been in collegiate strength and conditioning programs, which mean they should have a little bit more beef on them. And if we're talking about from the FBS level, on the FBS level, the biggest disadvantage for small schools is the size in the trenches. So if I go get me a offensive guard from Vanderbilt, he's probably going to be a tad bit bigger. If I go get myself a center from Iowa, he's going to be a little bit bigger. And I'm ready for those type of players because now it gives me an advantage because they don't have the size to match up. I now have the size. I think that is a huge benefit. But as we wrap up today's episode, I want to go and I want to take a look at a couple of quotes from Patrick Mahomes and Coco Gauff because they both had really major comments about their contributions to HBCUs recently. And I will talk about that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and the big game is here. It's Sunday. It's the Chiefs versus the Eagles. Speaking of Mahomes, right? What do you think Mahomes is going to do? What do you think Jalen Hurts is going to do? Are they going to force the ball into Hurts' hands a little bit more? Or is Saquon Barkley going to have a monster game? What about the game in general? Who wins? All of these questions are not just questions I'd love to know your answer to. They're questions that could make you a little bit of money if you go to FanDuel. Let's say that you're new. Let's say that you've never been to FanDuel before. You put down a $5 bet. If that wins, then you'll get $200 back in bonus bets to use at a later date. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com and make every moment more, whether it's the big game, whether it's the NBA, whether it's the US Open. You go ahead and take care of yours today. Get $200 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to quickly go over some of the contributions that Coco Gauff and Patrick Mahomes have made. Both are 2 of the biggest stars in their own respective sports. Let's start off with Gauff, who donated $100,000 in scholarships specifically to HBCU tennis athletes via the UNCF. This becomes applicable in May, so that's when you can start applying for it and whatnot. But this is what she had to say about it. She said, "My family has a deep-rooted history with HBCUs, going all the way back to my great-great-grandfather. From aunts to uncles to cousins, HBCUs have played a huge role in shaping who we are. Supporting UNCF in creating opportunities for student athletes in tennis means a lot to me. As a young Black athlete, I understand how impactful it is to see people who look like me thriving in both sports and education. We'll get back to that. I want to help the next generation of student athletes continue pursuing their passion for tennis while reaching their academic goals. My hope is that the scholarship gives more young Black players the confidence to choose their dreams, knowing they have a strong community behind them and bright future ahead." This says a lot about Coco Gauff, the person. I think that Coco Gauff, the athlete, she does enough. And honestly, I might keep the Mahomes topic out of it simply because it's related to the Legacy Bowl, and we'll probably start getting more into that next week. So we're just kind of focused on Gauff today. But I think it's great because Coco Gauff, the athlete, is an inspiration by herself. She doesn't need to do anything other than continue being successful and existing. right? Like, and I think that as a darker skinned Black woman, it applies so much more because you know how much of an inspiration she is to people who a lot of times don't feel represented in the crossover way that she is represented. She crosses past the boundary of tennis into pop culture, into different sponsorships. I think a lot of that has to do with her success on the court, of course, but you look at the impact that it has when she's not even around. And I do think that everything from success to race to pigment, I think all of that has to come into play, in my opinion, right? But it's more than just existing. When you say I'm gonna give $100,000 to schools, she could do a bunch of camps. She could do a bunch of camps, and that would be great. But she decided I wanted to make sure that these funds went to athletes who are attempting to push forward, trying to reach academic and athletic goals simultaneously. And I do think that that speaks volumes because she wanted to make sure that not only Black tennis players, but specifically HBCU athletes get that opportunity. So I just think that Coco Gauff has always been a class act. And I like tennis. I can't say I'm a tennis person anymore because I haven't watched it as much as I used to. But every time that I see Coco, she attempts to be a class act. After it's a sport, man. We're gonna have our emotions. But when you see her as a person, when you see her after a match, she always is a class act. I love the way that she does business. I love the way that she operates. And I love this move that she made right here. So we'll see if we see her on any HBCU campuses, but I think that this right here is more than enough, making the decision to donate $100,000 in scholarships to the UNCF, specifically for HBCU tennis athletes. This is great. This is great. This is great. Next week at some point, if not the week after, we're going to do Legacy Bowl coverage. We're going to do some sort of it. So we'll speak about Patrick Mahomes' comments at that time. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.